Again, for 12 or 14 hours a day, the people tug on their kayaks, trying to get them away from the police. You know, we hear that our government is out trying to bring democracy and freedom around the world, and they're building. We have about more than 800. They say between 800 and 1,000 military bases, U.S. bases around the world today. And I promise you, in every single place where they are, the people don't want them there, because the U.S. Pentagon is the biggest polluter in the world. We're polluting their community. We treat their people like shit. And they're fed up. And so this story here is multiplied 1,000-fold. But we don't think about that in America. We don't think about what happens when our planes or our warships or our troops go overseas. We don't think about how they treat people in other places. But when you go and see it for yourself, it's another world. When I came back, I was extremely determined to get other people to go and see this for themselves and to meet these beautiful people. And so I sent an email out to my list trying to raise money. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace. But I was not to be stopped, and so we found another person immediately. We found another way to get him there. He's there now, and we're working on sending other people as well. And so I'm going to keep working at it, keep trying to get other people to go, and others now around the world are also doing the same thing. The Japanese sent a delegation recently. They were blocked, but then they sent more people. They actually got them in there. So we're just going to keep sending more and more and more people. I thank you all for listening. And please do us a favor. Boycott. Who? Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause. We're going to have a contractor time. So questions?
Could you give us more evidence of how you are so certain that the military and all of its parts is I think you said, is the arm of corporate globalization?
Well, I can tell you a story. 2005, 2 years after shock and awe invasion of Iraq, in 2003, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, I was watching C-SPAN. You're all familiar with C-SPAN, the government channel where we can see Congress and all that. And it was an evening, and they had a 3-hour presentation, a huge auditorium, full of high-level military people. And they also said in the introduction there were high-level CIA people there as well. The speaker that evening was a guy by the name of Thomas Barnett, an instructor at the Naval War College. He was introduced as Donald Rumsfeld, who at that time was Secretary of War during the Bush administration. He was introduced as Rumsfeld's strategy guy. And he had just written a new book called The Pentagon's New Map. And this is what he said. He said, in the coming period, I said this earlier, that we're not going to have jobs in America anymore because it's cheaper for the corporations to move jobs overseas, maximize profits. Our role, he said, will be security export. So I already talked about that, right? Then he went on to say, he put up on the big screen a map of the world. He said, there are parts of the world today that are not submitting to the authority of corporate globalization. And he called it the non-integrating gap. The non-integrating gap. And he said, our job in the coming period is going to be, we're not going to, again, make shoes, we're not going to make refrigerators. Our job under corporate globalization is going to be to go into the non-integrating gap and bring them under control. And he said, these troops will never come home. And then he showed what the non-integrating gap was. The Middle East, where at that time we were occupying Iraq, at war in Iraq. Central Asia, where at that time we were also involved in the war in Afghanistan, as we are today, occupying Afghanistan. Africa, where he said we'll be fighting 20 years from now for their oil. That's a direct quote. And I like to say he was kind of prophetic because, as I said earlier, U.S. and NATO invaded Libya just a few months ago. And Libya has the most oil on the African continent. And finally, he said parts of Latin America are in this non-integrating gap. Places like Venezuela, where Hugo Chavez is not doing what the corporations want, which is basically surrender your oil to us or we'll take you out. And he said, so again, our job is going to be to go into these areas, security export, fight, bring them under control to benefit the multinational corporations. And these troops will never come home, he said. And then he said this. I've memorized this quote now, after all these years. And I said to myself, nobody's ever going to believe me when I tell them this. And so I'm going to have to order the video. So I ordered it from C-SPAN. I checked it to make sure I got the quote right. And here's the quote. Adolf Hitler never had to ask permission to invade another country, and neither will we. And he told the officers in the audience that on that evening, if you hope to get promoted in the coming years in the U.S. military, you must internalize this program they call military transformation and teach it to those under you. Now, he's talking about the strategy, but he's also talking about something else important that must be internalized, the ideology of control and domination. And in fact, the Space Command, the U.S. Space Command that is in charge of all this, published a planning document some years ago. It's on our website that you saw earlier. The website is spaceforpeace.org. Our newsletter's over there. It's on the newsletter as well. In this planning document, Vision for 2020, they spell this out. They say that in the coming period, because of corporate globalization, there's going to be a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots around the world. There's going to be more and more instability as people kick up because they don't want to be controlled by outside forces. And our job will be to go in and take control. So the sources are many within the military-industrial complex where they've been talking about this stuff for years. And we now see Obama, as well as George W. Bush, enforcing this military doctrine today that you all are paying for with your tax dollars in cuts in programs that you care about.
Here's the image of the vision, the document that he's referring to, the Vision for 2020 by Space Command.
You see the satellite hitting targets on the Earth below.
We have a question. Okay, let me get up there. I wanted to ask you really quickly on my way up there. You were going to talk about conversion and what's going on in Bath, Maine about converting.
I'll do that at the end.
Hi. Yeah.
Wait, I want to get it on the thing because it's going on the videotape.
Sure. Hi. So it feels like the cards are kind of stacked vastly against us with media corporations and government and military keeping us ignorant and powerless. It seems that way. While they're putting all their plans into action, honestly it feels completely like not something, at least the way it's being presented here, something we can actually combat. I mean, even with movements like your own and movements for peace activism, how do you plan on actually combating it?
Well, do you know what an Achilles heel is? Does everybody know what an Achilles heel is? Every person has an Achilles heel. That means a weak spot, a weakness, a fatal weakness, a fatal flaw, an Achilles heel. Everyone has a fatal flaw. Every person does. Every politician has an Achilles heel, a fatal flaw. And every master plan for global domination has a fatal flaw. And you know what their fatal flaw is today? Money. The Pentagon brags, they say that this whole space warfare dominated system is going to be the largest industrial project in the history of the planet Earth. And a few years ago, the industry publication called Space News said, look, we've got to be responsible corporate citizens. We've got to come up with a funding source to pay for this, and we have. And we're now sending our lobbyists to Washington to secure that funding source. And in this editorial in Space News, they spelled it out. They said it's the entitlement programs. Now, who here knows what the entitlement programs are officially in America today? Anybody? You don't count. Anybody know? Call them out.
Welfare and Social Security.
Say it louder, I can't.
Welfare and Social Security.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and what's left of the welfare program after Bill Clinton got through with it. These are the programs that the military-industrial complex has identified to destroy. And so the way I see it is that there are two trains heading on a collision course. One train is called Vision for 2020. Corporate globalization, security export. And the other train is called social progress. Social security, retirement. After you've worked, 50, 60 years, and you're limping around, and your back hurts, and you can't see anymore, and your teeth are falling out. And you might get $600, $700 a month retirement that you put into this program throughout your life as a worker. But they want to take it. So these two things are on a collision course: social progress and endless war, Vision for 2020. And so the question is, which one is going to be derailed? What gives me hope at this time is the recent Occupy movement that sprung up all over this nation and around the world, that really put on the national consciousness this question about the 1% and the 99%. And this growing income disparity between the two. And just think of this, all you physics and science majors. If you think of a pyramid, which is the stronger part of the pyramid? The top, where the oligarchy resides, the 1%. Oligarchy means control of the many by the few, which is what we have today. Or the bottom of the pyramid, where all the rest of us are, the 99%, which is the stronger base. Well, the way I feel about it is, I think of it as a puzzle on the wall, and as the pieces increasingly get added, as I begin to understand the picture, as I begin to really see what's going on, me, this young Republican, military, patriotic Boy Scout that swallowed the bait and was reeled in by the U.S. military. One more tool, right? But I became liberated. I became liberated. My mind was colonized. My mind was colonized. And your minds are colonized today. My mind is still colonized on some level by this corporate militarism, by this corporate consumerism that teaches us to buy, shop, shop, be a consumer, be a customer, be a product, but not be a person, not be a human being. What does it mean to be a human being on this earth today? What is the number one job of a human being on this planet Earth today? To shop at Walmart? To buy a Samsung product? What does it mean to be a human being? What's the most important thing? And when you grapple with that and you begin to decolonize your mind, you actually become a free human being. And then you can do something about all this naughty stuff that's going on. That's my answer to your question.
On. Here.
So when you say do something, despite being educated about the problem, what do you suggest? Like calling our congressman or having our own protests? What would you suggest that me, as an average person or a college student, can do for this cause?
That's a great question. Hold on one second.
Do you need help?
Anyway, I wanted to show you.
I'll do it. What do you want?
I'm trying to go to. I think we have to sort out what our real priorities are. You know, again, that's where I ask you this question, what does it mean to be a human being today? We have to sort out what's the most important thing. A car, a house, a fancy lawn, you know, a business card you can brag about. What's the most important thing? I think first of all, we have to start there. We have to decolonize our own mind. We have to become real human beings, because we can't really be talking about changing anything until we become free agents. And so that's where we start. But then the question becomes, well, what do we ask for? What is our demand, right? And everybody's worrying about jobs these days. Everybody's talking about jobs. And they're job scared and job worried. Well, let's talk about jobs for a moment, okay? I want to show you a study that the University of Massachusetts at Amherst Economics Department did, where they looked at $1 billion of military spending. And they found that, yes, it's true, if you spend $1 billion on military production, if you spend $1 billion on military production, you create 8,600 jobs. But they said if you take that same $1 billion and you put it into anything else, whether it's tax cuts or home weatherization or healthcare or education, you create more jobs. And in fact, if you build a national rail system, getting us out of our gas-guzzling cars, connecting every corner of the country, helping to solve for our real problem today, which is climate change. I live in Maine. We had no snow this winter. The lakes and ponds never froze enough so that people could go ice fishing. We had 84-degree temperatures in March, when normally we have 2 feet of snow on the ground. Climate change is real, and it's happening. And we've got to begin to try to deal with the coming ravages of climate change. So if we build a national rail system, the UMass Amherst Economics Department found, we could create 19,675 jobs for every $1 billion we spend. So instead of creating 8,600 jobs, so this study lays it out for us. We can solve our job crisis in this country. We can either spend $1 billion and create 8,600 jobs, or $1 billion and create almost 20,000 jobs. Which would you rather have? Doing something that's good for the environment, good for the country. But the problem is, the politicians don't want to do it because they're under control of the corporations that are behind this whole program. And so we have to have a demand. We have to have a unifying demand of all the various movements in America. The labor movement, the unions who are looking for jobs, the environmental community who wants to deal with climate change, the peace movement who's tired of war and says we got to stop killing people for oil, students who, when you graduate, you hope to be able to find a job because you've got this huge debt that you now have to pay back. So what is our collective demand in this country? Well, we need a demand calling for the conversion of the military-industrial complex to sustainable production so that we can deal with the reality of climate change. And so this demand could unify all the movements across the country. You know, there was once another time in American history when we had a very dark, evil economic system. And politicians and preachers and a lot of media apologized and said there's no way that we can get rid of this dark, evil economic system in America. And today we have another dark, evil economic system. And we're chained to it like slaves. Our local communities increasingly are addicted to military spending because there's no other jobs, because the jobs have all gone overseas. But one of the great abolitionists of the anti-slavery movement, Frederick Douglass, said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." So the question is, what is our demand? And so the way we get out from behind this 8 ball is we organize all around us to create this demand. Stop the wars, take the money, use it for social progress, derail that train of vision for 2020. And it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take lifetime of work, and there's no guarantees we're going to succeed. But if we don't do it, we're not going to succeed, and we're going to go down hard. And I believe that we all have a responsibility to the coming generations. The Native Americans said, everything we do has to be based on how it impacts, how it affects the next 7 generations. And that's where our minds need to be today. Not about ourselves, not about our own careers, not about what we have, but about the future generations. That is the job of a human being on this planet Earth today, is to protect the future generations.
All right. Well, that's a perfect line to end on, don't you think? Let's thank Bruce
Thank you.
for stopping by.
Thank you.